Welcome to Fringe Pop 321, the show that believes the world is stranger than we think, but thinking should not be strange. Ancient Egypt was home to a number of pharaohs who are well known even today. For instance, there's King Tut, Tutankhamun, Ramses II, Hatshepsut, and Cleopatra. Of course, the latter two were female pharaohs. But none of these pharaohs achieved the notoriety or the infamy of Akhenaten. Many listeners will know Akhenaten for his religious revolution, for which he became known as the heretic king. Akhenaten rejected the traditional polytheistic religion of his ancestors in favor of exclusive devotion to the Aten, the sun disk. And scholars have long wondered about the motivation behind all this. In his own words, the pharaoh's goal was to teach men the truth. But many scholars are suspicious that what he actually wanted was revenge. For, believe it or not, being bullied. Now, it's known from Egyptian records that early in his life and reign, he had been, as one scholar, Erwin Braverman, puts it, quote, excluded from court functions, possibly because of his strange physique, unquote. Now, that idea is interesting, but ancient alien theorists are not buying it. Akhenaten's appearance was so odd that ancient aliens believers believe that he was an extraterrestrial hybrid. Yep, you heard me correctly. Is that for real? Is there any substance to that claim? Well, pardon the pun, but let's take a good look at Akhenaten. To understand why anyone would think that Akhenaten was an alien hybrid because of his appearance, you need to take a good look at him. And we can do that through Egyptian iconography and sculpture, which, to be blunt, was anything but flattering. Statuary depicts Akhenaten as being androgynous. He had full lips, the bodily curvature of a woman, with wide hips and even breasts. He also had an elongated head with a triangular jawline and overly large almond-shaped eyes. It goes without saying that Akhenaten was truly strange-looking, but we have to ask some questions. Are these artistic portrayals true to life? If they are we left with no other explanation than he was part alien? Let's start with the question of whether these portrayals of Akhenaten are true to life. In other words, did he really look like this? Well, some scholars think not. They believe the portrayals are simply pejorative, a way to mock the hated pharaoh. But this argument comes with an obvious difficulty. If this artwork was contrived and designed to ridicule Akhenaten, and it was created during his reign, so they could mock him, he would certainly have reacted angrily. The artist would have had to have some sort of death wish to do this. To make this argument work, one would have to argue that all these artifacts post-date the demise of Akhenaten, and they're sort of mocking and ridiculing him after the fact. But unfortunately, that's something that actually cannot be established. These are from the same time period. So the notion that these portrayals aren't realistic doesn't seem at all coherent. Other scholars and scientists, likely the majority, think that Akhenaten really did look this odd. And that would raise another question. Why the abnormalities? So why did Akhenaten look so odd? Medical experts theorize that Akhenaten had a disease or a genetic abnormality, or several of them. There are, in fact, several known options that account for all of his abnormal features. The genetics of Akhenaten and his immediate family are in fact known. Their DNA has been profiled, and there's nothing extraterrestrial about those profiles. But let's unpack the data. To begin, we have iconography, in other words, sculptures of Akhenaten in his youth that show no abnormalities of appearance. It's a fact of the artistic record that at the beginning of his reign at age 10, Akhenaten was a plump, chubby-cheeked young boy with no abnormal features. Had Akhenaten been fathered by an alien, the features from which that idea springs would have manifested in the first 10 years of his life, especially the elongated skull. Now, Akhenaten's remains have not been fully found. However, the remains in KV 55, specifically the skull that you're looking at, have been suggested by most Egyptologists as in fact the remains of Akhenaten. You could go to the episode website to learn a little bit more about the controversy. But it's very obvious that this is a pronounced feature of the KV 55 skull, a very elongated skull. But that really hasn't satisfied most people. Now here's a family tree for Akhenaten. We can see from this family tree that Akhenaten's grandfather was Thutmose IV, his father was Amenhotep III, and that he himself was the father of Tutankhamun. It is noteworthy that his grandfather, father, and son, King Tut, had the enlarged skull feature that we see with KV 55 or Akhenaten. Now, since Akhenaten's early portrayals don't have this pronounced feature, the deformity therefore developed over time. He didn't pop out of the womb with a big alien head, in other words. There are genetic explanations for this deformity and his other physical abnormalities, which also developed over time. So what are some of the very human medical and genetic conditions that could account for Akhenaten's physical features? Well, there are actually over 10 possibilities. Again, some of them medical, some of them genetic, and some of them just generally better than others. From the larger list on the episode webpage, some examples we can mention here include gynecomastia. That's a hormone imbalance that causes swollen breast tissue in men and in the fatty abdominal region. There's also something called Kennedy's disease. And this disease features symptoms that include familial gynecomastia and post-pubertal hypoandrogenism, which is a genetically determined X-linked disease. Antley-Bixler syndrome is another candidate, which is a rare genetic disorder with cranial and endocrine abnormalities that involves deficient estrogen steroidogenesis and abnormal cranial bone formation. Now, this one is probably ruled out since it usually includes sterility, and Akhenaten obviously had children. Loeys-Dietz syndrome, LDS. This is a syndrome that is probably the best candidate. It is an autosomal dominant inherited disorder of connective tissue. It's caused by a genetic mutation, and patients are characterized by cranial deformation and other traits Akhenaten is known for. In fact, Akhenaten's father, Amenhotep III, and his son, Tutankhamun, share half of a dozen pathologies associated with Loeys-Dietz syndrome. You can see the episode webpage for a full list of symptoms for this syndrome and that were shared by Akhenaten and his father and his son. Now, to boil it all down, what all this essentially means is that we have a choice to make. We can hypothesize that one of several known human genetic or medical conditions can explain the appearance of Akhenaten and his close family, or we can believe that he's an alien hybrid. Now, the former gives us known and testable items that have already produced clear correlations. The only question is which one of those known causes is the correct one. The other hypothesis, an alien hybrid, is not at all testable. We have no physical, biological proof for intelligent extraterrestrials, and so we can't make the argument that Akhenaten has extraterrestrial DNA that would cause his physical features. That's just the end of the story and the verdict of the data. Thanks for watching Fringe Pop 321. Please visit our website, not only for the abundance of information on this episode, but on all of our episodes. Go to fringepop321.com for all of that information. If you want to support what we're doing here, go to fp321.com/S, as in the letter S. And come back and watch other episodes, because what you know may not be so.